How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another Discover Wellness with Dr. David. I'm honored here to have as a guest again our expert nutritionalist and holistic expert, Ryan. Welcome, Ryan.
Hey David, how we doing?
I'm great. How about yourself?
Doing fantastic. Glad to be here.
And what are we going to be talking about tonight with our viewers?
Right, so today I really just wanted to talk about how nutrition and mental health are kind of intertwined. Especially in today's world, we see mental health issues rising by the day, whether that be anxiety, stress, depression, addictions as well too. I think they all kind of go hand in hand, and I really just wanted to kind of take the time to explain how certain nutrients within our diet can really help improve our mood and overall well-being.
Awesome. I think that this, especially during the pandemic, where mental health has been a big, large issue of concern for many of our viewers, I think this is going to be very beneficial. I'm very excited to hear a lot of the information that you have to provide for us.
I agree 100%. Like I said, especially during this pandemic, it's more relevant now than ever.
Where would you like to start off at? Would we like to talk about some of the things that will cause some of these negative mental health effects, or do we want to jump into first ways that we can improve our mental health, both diet and exercise and things along those lines?
Right. Well, I tell every single person I work with, your mental health starts and ends in the gut. I really think that's probably the best place to start and probably to end back up at as well. Really just kind of explaining the connection between your gut and all the food that goes there and all the vitamins and minerals and how that really correlates with your mental health that goes up to your brain and the rest of your body as well. What I've kind of found just over years from personal anecdotes as well is your gut and your brain are they're the same thing, to be honest with you. They really are. There are literally trillions of nerves connecting your gut to your brain. And that's whenever you hear someone say, hey, trust your gut, it's a real thing. But I found that people can't trust their gut reliably without proper balance within that gut. Just as a kind of general description of it, your gut has got more bacteria sitting there than there are stars in the galaxy. Well over 100 trillion different bacteria strains. But I'm sorry, of bacteria, not necessarily different strains, but there's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria. And we need those to be very balanced out for us to have proper mental health and just overall balance within our bodies. And when that's imbalanced, we see things such as inflammation, just overall indigestion as well too. It plays a huge role in how we actually digest our vitamins and minerals. But what I've found is, especially in modern society, nearly everything that we have going on, it disrupts that bacteria. And that's a no-no if you're really trying to keep your mental health in check. Just to list a quick few, a huge thing is in today's society, alcohol. Alcohol directly disrupts that gut bacteria, helping facilitate more bad bacteria growth. And along with that, sugar as well too, and just overall processed foods in the American diet. I found that all of these foods are very inflammatory, which is if you're trying to overall increase your mental health, the number one goal really is to reduce that inflammation. The term is called neuroinflammation, which is whenever your nervous system is inflamed. And the root of that usually goes right back to the gut, like I said, with all those inflammatory processed foods going into the gut and just breaking down and causing all of this acidity, but it is disrupting that balance within the bacteria. And truthfully, that is probably the biggest root that I've seen working with people. I've found that whenever we really hone in on repairing that gut bacteria balance, that is where the majority of the mental health improvements have come from. And that has exponential effects for the rest of the body as well and your overall well-being. But yeah, gut health, I said everything in our society, especially in America here, in Western society, we can't help it. It's like it's there to disrupt us. Even the things you put on your skin, your soaps and your shampoos, even that's absorbing into your bloodstream and infecting your gut bacteria as well. So I said, if I had to think of the very first place to start, it's always looking at your gut. It is minimizing what increases the bad bacteria and increasing the good bacteria, which is known as probiotics. It's a very popular supplement, but we can also get it in a lot of whole foods as well too. You may have found, I'm sure you've probably heard, yogurt, kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut, and those are all great options. They're fermented foods, which fermentation leads to more bacteria. But truthfully, my favorite to recommend to anybody at all is called goat milk kefir. And I know it's probably something most people don't hear about, but it is fermented goat milk. And the reason I recommend that is because a large portion of the population has lactose intolerance as well. So it's lactose free, so people who are having troubles with dairy tolerance can really digest it. But the reason I recommend that to everyone, I personally put it in just all of my protein shakes after my workouts or before bed. That has really got the most amount of good bacteria with the most diversity of strains, and the goal is to have diversity. The more you've got of different kinds, the more they can interact within your body and send signals to your brain in different ways. So that is really my point, like most important, but not everybody. Let me rephrase that. Not everybody prefers kefir. Some people just don't like the taste at first. They don't have anything really good to mix it in with. It's another option. I always say if you just got to go up to your vitamin shop, probiotics are great. My number one
What about
recommendation.
just goat cheese rather than goat kefir?
So yeah, the goat kefir, it's just much more fermented. That's like fermented anything means it's rotten. So I always tell people, don't worry about it. It's not going to go bad. It already is bad. That's kind of why I like it as well. I know it's not going to spoil my refrigerator. It already is. Like I said, I'm not against that as well. But the goal is to have the fermentation process. That is what's helping facilitate the growth of the good bacteria that we want to put into our gut microbiome. So I'm not against different forms of that, so especially if you are looking for a good alternative to dairy. Goat's always my recommendation for that. But keep in mind, dairy itself is a kind of important thing to talk about, is inflammatory. Most people don't realize that. I do believe that raw, like non-processed dairy has probably got some beneficial properties, but overall, especially processed dairy and cheese, very inflammatory, which is going to have negative effects not only on digestion, but also going forward with mental health as well.
I think that is a lesser known fact that there was a mutation in American cows that affected the casein proteins that are produced by the cows that have an antibiotic effect to our gut bacteria. And that is largely responsible for a lot of those inflammatory effects that our typical American dairy has. And it is something that there are 6 times as many nerves going to your brain to your stomach, or from your brain to your stomach, than there are going from your brain to your spine, which controls your whole body. And so that just shows how important our mind-gut connection is. And so what are some other ways that we can help feed some of those good bacteria? I know we need probiotics, but is fiber very important as well for feeding that bacteria once you sort of plant the probiotic seeds, so to speak?
Absolutely. So fiber is what's known as a prebiotic. Like you just said, it's like food for the probiotics. They're living organisms. They have to be fed so they can stay alive within that pretty harsh environment. So yeah, fiber is great. Plenty of green vegetables. Personally, I use something called bone meal, which is just so that's for my calcium. I apologize. They sit right beside in my cabinet. Just prebiotic fiber I just put into my protein shakes. That's something I actually struggle to get throughout my diet. So I do have vegetables, but it's very, very hard to get the 30 grams that most people are trying to shoot for. Yeah, so fiber is very much essential. Just eat your vegetables, anything green. So my go-to is broccoli for that. There's probably a few other better options out there. But absolutely, giving it the food to survive within those harsh environments is essential. But another important thing is, like I said, minimizing the bad bacteria. And I think it's important to say, most people, you get a sickness, you go to the doctor, and they give you an antibiotic. What most people don't realize is that antibiotic is killing off all the good bacteria as well too. So it's actually leaving you more likely to become sick in the future. That's really important as well. Keep in mind that 80% of your immune system sits within that gut, and it is that bacteria. So if that's not balanced out, you're more likely to become sick. Your immune system is compromised. So go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, is it true that animals that, these factory farmed meat that's treated with antibiotics, is that true that those antibiotics then carry over and then affect our gut bacteria?
Absolutely. That on top of a number of things we spray on all of our fruits and vegetables now, the glyphosates and herbicides, pesticides, every single one of those are influence our gut bacteria. Especially, antibiotics within that and added hormones and disrupting our endocrine system. Absolutely. That's something that's really important. It's not necessarily what you're eating, it is where it's coming from, where it's sourced. Of course, what you're eating matters, but there's a distinct difference between the steak you're going to go buy at the food line versus the steak you're going to get directly from a farmer. Just minimally processed, no additives, no hormones, no preservatives. And that is essential for keeping your gut fully balanced out. Because I tell people, anything that you put in your body or on your body will affect that gut bacteria. It's just designed to go straight there to be processed, and that's where we really have got to take care of. But going back to what I said about when doctors prescribe these antibiotics, what most people don't realize is that there is a number of natural antibiotics as well that are very, very powerful. Most are pretty common household items, like turmeric is probably my favorite. It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory. It's actually proven to work better than Prozac for depression, which I think is pretty important. It's got a number of effects with the joint health as well, just keeping that inflammation down. But turmeric, garlic, and I believe onion as well, all of those are very powerful antimicrobials and antibiotics that are just natural without harming the good bacteria as well too.
They're bad for the pathogenic bacteria, but good for the good bacteria, like the mucinophila bacteria, and a lot of those ones that promote a lot of our healthy reactions.
Precisely. That's exactly it. And actually that leads into what kind of I was going to walk into. What those bacteria are doing, they're actually not only helping you absorb these vitamins and minerals, but we actually can create our own vitamins and minerals as well. It's like our body creates its own pharmacy for everything that we really need. But without that proper bacteria balance, we can't create neurotransmitters that keep our mental health balanced. The two most common are, serotonin and dopamine. Most people don't realize that 90 up to 95% of our serotonin is made in the gut by that bacteria. So if we can't process that serotonin in our gut, it can't go all the way up to the brain. And that's
as is melatonin, from what I understand as well, correct?
Absolutely. It's melatonin. Like I said, the majority is really made in the gut. And along those same lines, GABA, GABA, which is the main calming neurotransmitter, is also made in the gut as well. So like I said, going back to what I said, your mental health starts and ends in the gut. It really does. And that's affecting every other system in your body.
Well, what are some of the ways that these bad bacteria flourish, and what are some of the ways that we can sort of mitigate that?
Right. So kind of touch on what I said earlier. It is really minimizing the inflammatory triggers that are also, so for example, like I said, alcohol, sugar, processed carbs, industrial seed oils. Like I personally tell everybody, the only oils I would really recommend are olive oil and coconut oil. Avocado oil as well, but there's really only 2 to 3 well-sourced avocado oils I can find, so it's just easier to go without it. But every other oil, your canola oil, your safflower, your sunflower, your soybean oil, very inflammatory and disrupting a number of things in our body, specifically that gut bacteria. But I think
what about something like ghee?
Ghee, that's right. That's another one I've actually started using recently. And I'm not scared of saturated fats at all. I don't necessarily there's a whole fat-free campaign going on in the 80s and 90s that kind of brought us away from fats, and that's actually a huge part of what has caused our mental health problems, because these good fats, they are anti-inflammatory. That's kind of why fish oil is always recommended for mental health, just keeping that inflammation down. But truthfully, going into the good fats, the best source always will be salmon, in my opinion. I can't get around it. And the reason, or just wild caught seafood in general, but I love salmon. I'm biased against it, or for it. But the reason I recommend
salmon,
my
favorite as well,
to everyone I work with, especially wild caught, because it has just more of these omega-3s, is because even though fish oil is great and it does help a lot of people, the specific, it's called DHA. It is one of the 2 omega-3s in fish oil. It is not necessarily in the proper form for our body to absorb in a supplement. So we get much more absorbed out of seafood and just natural whole foods of getting that in the first place. So as much as I do recommend supplementation to fill in the gaps, we can ideally get these from our whole foods as well in our diet. So going back to what you were saying about keeping the gut bacteria balanced out, what we can avoid. Like I said, number 1 is really going to be alcohol, sugar. Those are staples that just destroy every bit of it, and it creates candida overgrowth and a number of parasites and fungus and mold built up in that, which means even more so that gut bacteria can't flourish the way it needs to. And going back to can't send signals to the brain. But other than that, it is really sort of keeping the triggers out of there. I think most people have got a general idea of what's good and bad for them. Like we all know alcohol, not the best. Sugar, hopefully people know that sugar is not healthy at this point. But just really minimally processed diet. That's going to be the key to it. And as well as that, using a number of just herbs and spices is what I found to be easiest for people. They really are very powerful. That's why every single spice you'll find, there's usually a supplement for it that's just in a higher dosage. So they have these antimicrobial, antibacterial effects that can really kind of pinpoint the problem and target that within your gut and create that balance without the need of intervention of other medications that are potentially causing more harm.
Well, I'm always shocked to find out how many practices that are considered to be healthy or good for you that actually have ties back to their effects on your gut health. Like omega-3s, EPA and DHA, they've been shown to affect not only the counts of your good bacteria, but actually affect the species, types of bacteria that you have in your gut. Fasting or exercise creates more beta-hydroxybutyrate, which affects your microgut biome makeup as well. Sauna use, lots of these behaviors that are looked at as healthy or life prolonging have effects that trace back to the gut biome. And so would you say that the gut connection is probably paramount rather than any other health markers that you could be focusing on?
Yes, I would. Of course, don't neglect, the heart, the brain, all the other systems in your body. They're all connected. But yeah, absolutely. Everything goes back to the gut, like I said. And something you mentioned, I kind of caught my attention. Fasting is probably, I always like to recommend the free things first to anybody. Fasting is a miracle for gut health. It really is. And the reason that is because our bodies, we are kind of designed, especially, like I said, in America, to eat all day long. It is, we have breakfast, we're hungry in 2 or 3 hours because we had so many carbs. Now we need another snack, and then lunch, and then another snack, and then dinner, and then a dessert. And that's just, we're constantly hungry, but our gut and all of that bacteria, all of those organs, they don't get a break. They never get a break. And what fasting does is it takes all of that pressure off of the gut for even just a few hours and allows all of the blood flow, everything else to go to the rest of your body and kind of start to heal and repair what's needed that wasn't getting before. So fasting is intermittent fasting more so. Most people don't want to do a full 24-hour fast out of nowhere. But intermittent fasting is fantastic. So if you're also looking for just an easier way to facilitate weight loss, it typically does lead to less calorie intake, so that's a win-win, and it has exponential benefits for your hormones as well too. So fasting, if they could do it ideally, I'd recommend doing minimum of 16 hours of fasting. But if you're really looking to repair the gut, I would experiment pushing that forward to 20 to even a whole 24-hour fast. But like you said, you mentioned the sauna and exercise as well. Even just sweating on a day-to-day basis is exponential for it. Just getting all those heavy metals, those toxins, all the things that we really just don't need. That's kind of what your body is designed to do. It's really just designed to flush out anything that it doesn't need and create and hold on to all the things that it does need. So absolutely, just taking, like you said, more of a holistic approach is essential. But yes, gut health is paramount. Especially for mental health, I think it kind of starts and ends there. But looking at the other systems of the body related to proper mental health, I think it ties right into the nervous system. I think that's the second major focus that's paramount. Especially, I keep saying it, in America, modern world, we've just got all this technology in front of us. We're constantly in front of a screen. And that is, on its own, that is overstimulating our nervous system. Our bodies, we're not designed to look at artificial light every single day. We were meant to be out in the sun, moving our bodies, sweating, getting all these toxins out. But now we're constantly sedentary, and we're in front of screens all day. So our nervous system is constantly overstimulated. You combine that with drugs and alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, all these stimulating substances that we've just normalized in society, even a cup of coffee nowadays. That is down-regulating, is the word for it, your dopamine. So your receptors are kind of not working the same, and they're kind of left scrambling to find something to kind of fill in that gap. The best way I can describe it is a grocery store that is busy as can be. You've got every single register filled up with employees ready to go on a Sunday afternoon. And that Monday morning, you have the entire staff working, but no one's in the store. So they're all kind of just, what do I do with myself? And that is actually the root. Of course, there's always a root of most addictions that we see today, whether that be caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, sugar, social media, just all goes back to an overstimulated nervous system. And I think that is a huge, if not the root cause of what has caused such a rise in ADHD and ADD and focus disorders within kids especially. Truthfully, I was kind of probably the first generation to have a screen from a very young age. And I can just see it compared to people 10, 20 years older. So our focus is nowhere near the same. We really can't stay focused on something because we're constantly wanting that dopamine hit.
Would you agree, though, that I've noticed this personally, since I have started taking more of a focus on the gut health and more of an overall holistic approach to my overall health, I have noticed a great improvement in my ability to focus and learn new things, and my overall cognitive performance has risen exponentially just after focusing on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, keeping that inflammation down is probably like the root of it. And when your brain is not inflamed, it can actually work the way it's supposed to. And when your nerves are firing the right way, they're not overstimulated, they're not understimulated. It creates something called neurogenesis, which is the creation of new nerve cells, and that is how we learn. So whenever you learn something for the first time, these new pathways in your brain kind of signal and they go off and they create new pathways. And that's how we have that imprint going forward. So I absolutely agree. I find that most people, it's really hard to even retain information. It's hard to keep their memory and their focus.
In one ear and out the other.
Exactly. And so I'm guilty of it myself. I don't want to be a hypocrite and tell you that I'm perfect over here, but it absolutely goes back to inflammation. And that's another reason why fish oil is so popular, because it helps with brain fog. And brain fog is usually just the result of inflammation in the brain and the nerves. And another huge part that just on a daily basis that most people don't really take into account is your blood sugar as well too. I think I talked about it in the last podcast, but carbs turn into sugar in our body, and which spikes your blood sugar, which will eventually lower. Which is why personally, unless you're just trying to gain a lot of weight and you're trying to get the calories in, I don't recommend carbs in the morning, because that spikes up your blood sugar. And when it's low, you're irritable, you can't focus, you're just thinking about the next time you're going to eat or take a nap. So I really do paying attention to how your body responds to carbs and sugar, especially the difference between processed and non-processed carbs. You go and tell me how you feel after eating a whole thing of bacon cheese fries versus how you feel after eating some rice or some potatoes that are well sourced. I think it kind of speaks for itself, but going back to the mental health and just overall focus and performance throughout the day, I think it's essential to pay attention to how inflamed not only your gut, just your entire body is. And that inflammation, it speaks in so many different ways and so many different symptoms for people. Like for some people, that inflammation is joint problems, especially as you get older and older. But a lot of times it's indigestion, it's food allergies, it's headaches, it's brain fog. It shows throughout the entire body, but it really stems right back to what you're putting into it and where that's going, which is the gut.
Well, thank you so much for giving us all this information on how to improve our gut health and how it connects to our brain, and ways that we can actually improve our gut health and improve our cognitive function. So thank you so much for your time again, Ryan, tonight. Y'all have a great night, and thank you for tuning in.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it.